Let me introduce you to Pokemon Channel. I would have never played this game if it weren't for the ace the European version had up its sleeve. By completing it, you're able to send a Jirachi over to one of your mainline games. A cynical, sneaky trick for sure, but I'm afraid it certainly got me, and I assume many others, to buy and play it. It's a very bare bones game and has an atmosphere not unlike that of a preschool show. A lot of people tediously claim all Pokemon games are kiddie, and if all of them were on the same level as this, then they would actually have a point. And yet, despite all that weighing against it, I ended up having more fun with the game than I care to admit. All you do is hang out with Pikachu, watch TV shows ran by Pokemon, and sometimes go outside to meet others. But it's such a charming, relaxing and original game, and more enjoyable than I thought it had any right to be, I couldn't help getting drawn in. My only real complaint was that there wasn't a whole lot to see and do, but I think with a more involved world, with way more channels to watch, it could be turned into something awesome. Maybe a life simulation game, but set around TVs and the stuff you can do with them is what I have in mind. From one unpopular Pokemon opinion to another now, Pokemon Black and White won. Fine games and all, but I still think they get vastly overrated by many. Having only new Pokemon during the main adventure was a fantastic idea, making it a fresh experience even for someone like me who's played every generation since the start, but I can't help thinking it was a bit wasted on this particular game. Compared to Heart Gold, Soul Silver and Platinum in the previous generation, it seemed like a huge step backwards in many regards. The main adventure felt really short compared to what I was used to, and while it's certainly more challenging than some, but not all, it was when the series was generally starting to become easy enough that I didn't really have to put any thought into my strategies. While I certainly don't dislike Yuvana as a region, the path you take during the adventure has got to be the most linear in the whole series. It's basically just a straight line that wouldn't look too out of place in Final Fantasy XIII. Now, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I heard this was because some players got lost during the Sinnoh adventures, so they decided to simplify the world design for the sequel. This is exactly the kind of dumbing down that has severely hurt the series in my opinion. I also didn't appreciate anything of the already limited size of the region being used by the sparse Sky Arrow Bridge. Ooh, look at this fancy interactive cutscene with no substance or gameplay to speak of. What a valuable use of development time. I also believe the game somehow did a worse job of introducing Pokemon as the game progresses than the first generation did with the original 151, even though it had a near equal amount of Pokemon to work with. For example, I swear every damn trainer until the third gym had the 3 elemental monkeys for their teams, and it's made me resent the trio ever since. But again, to be clear, I don't dislike the games at all, I just don't view them as the golden standard of the series that cannot and will not be matched ever again. Thankfully, the sequels improved upon most of my issues with the first games, even if it did lock the difficulty options behind the most cumbersome and baffling system I've ever seen in a game. What were they thinking with that? Given the choice between The Simpsons Hit and Run or Grand Theft Auto 4, I'd have to go with Hit and Run any day of the week. Hit and Run mainly focuses on what I want from GTA games. Fun missions involving vehicles and a chance to drive around the city like a loon. GTA 4 on the other hand has the most boring and samey missions in the series, not counting the Ballad of Gay Tony missions. It's been years since I played it now, but when I think back on the missions, I swear the same thing would happen in almost every one. Drive to location, shoot all the foes inside, reach your target, oh shit, he's trying to escape, chase after him, oh no, he got away, time to replay the whole mission from the start. Ugh. The story tried way too hard to be some gritty gangster movie and it came across as embarrassing most of the time, especially Nico's hypocritical constant boo-hooing about how much he detests being a criminal, and then proceeding to murder 20 innocent people in the subway because he felt like it. I'd much rather have fun hanging out with Homer and his family, yes, even Lisa, in Springfield instead of hating my time with miserable Mr. Bellic in Liberty City. Dragon Quest VII sucks major big time ass and is my least favourite mainline Dragon Quest game I've played so far by a huge margin. I'm a huge fan of every other entry I've played so far. I could sit and think of any particular bugbears I've had with them and come up with nothing. Even my former least favourite 2, the only reason why I put it at the bottom was because the encounter rate was slightly higher than normal, but the game was still an amazing achievement for the NES, though I must note that I played the mobile/Switch re-release, not the original. But Dragon Quest VII, I'm not even sure what the reasonable minimum I'd have to be paid to put myself for the whole game again. £1,000 perhaps? But if I think about all that I'll have to go through again, I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm not even sure that would be enough. And what hurts is that on paper this should have been one of my top favourites in the series alongside 11, 8, 5 and 3. The literal world building aspect and the power to visit each island in the past and present practically writes a great game and stories all by itself. But my god, this has got to be the most monotonous and overly long RPG I've ever had the misfortune to play. When I think back on my time with this game, nearly all I can remember is running around town, speaking to NPCs over and over in a desperate bid to progress the story, all while the most annoying town music ever composed drills its way into the core of my brain. A comparison would be if the near future chapter from Live Alive was turned into a full-fledged and extremely long game. Boring but bearable for a few hours, utterly excruciating when spread across literal days of playtime. The only shining light deep within the mountains of bullshit for me personally was the chance to get the most out of the class changing system after my gargantuan gaming gaffe with Dragon Quest VI and not using for most of that game as a result. But Dragon Quest VII even balls that up by removing a party member from the team 75% into the adventure for no real reason and after I spent so much time building up their skills. Pardon me for making another comparison, but imagine if in Final Fantasy V, Krill didn't inherit Galuf's skills when he dies and you had to build her out from scratch, or if in Pokemon, one of your integral team members was taken away for some random reason and didn't return until the game's nearly over, now too severely underleveled to use anymore. Well, with Dragon Quest VII, you don't need to rely on imagination. Now, I know I'll probably be told that it's usually considered the weakest entry in the series by most people, and that this isn't really all that unpopular. If that's the case, then let's just say the gigantic chasm between this and my second least favourite Dragon Quest game is the true unpopular opinion here. Ni no Kuni sucks, and as cool as the overall concept sounded on paper, when the execution isn't done well, then even the best ideas on the planet aren't going to salvage the final result. The first time I heard about this game from a magazine, it was originally going to be on the DS and came with a magic book. You could learn how to cast the spells by looking through the book and then use them in the game however you see fit. Holy shit, what an awesome idea. I instantly pictured all the fun I could have just flipping through the book and then thinking of ways to utilise them during battles during gameplay. It sounded incredible, I couldn't wait to get my hands on this game. But I didn't hear anything about it for years and assumed it was canned. I eventually learned it came out on the DS only in Japan and later on the PS3 everywhere else, but without the book idea. Never mind though, because the game still sounded like it would be just as good but in a different way. A semi-real-time battle system with Pokemon elements by level 5 and Studio Ghibli visuals. Holy cow, sign me up right now! Sadly, reality can't always match expectation, but not only was it not as good as I would have liked, I struggled to get any joy out of the experience at all. It felt like a total slog from beginning to end. I always had to force myself to play it every time. The combat just didn't work and left me wishing I could play a straightforward, typical turn-based RPG instead of this bizarre hybrid. Not to mention, the AI for the other two characters was borderline non-existent, making bosses so much harder than they would be if you had direct control over their actions. I will say though, the monsters you could tame and control helped me learn to appreciate Pokemon so much more, due to how unappealing they were. I'm not usually one to complain about the designs of Pokemon. I think pretty much all of them are fine, have more thought put into them than many give them credit for, and just seem right to me. That wasn't the case with the Ni no Kuni monsters, who were nothing more than cheap knockoff Pokemon to me. I just couldn't give a rat's ass about them or get invested in their growth and performance in battles. Also, the way the story starts with Oliver's mum dying and how she died instantly put a damper on the story right from the start, further deterring me from wanting to touch the game. It's a bit difficult to get excited and shout, "Yeah, let's go on a kick-ass adventure around the fancy world and have the time of our lives, woo!" when that's how the journey begins, let me tell you. So, more than anything, Ni no Kuni taught me that execution is far more important than invention and to always be careful to buy into any sort of hype, even if said hype mostly comes from yourself. I didn't realise this was actually an unpopular opinion for many years, but I liked the Contra 3 top-down stages. Except for the boss of the 5th stage, fuck that slimy fat fucking bastard. But in general, they were a fun change of pace, and that view of the whole level before picking your location reminded me of a map screen, which I had a weird obsession with in SNES games, like Super Mario World's world map and Super Mario Kart's map on the bottom half of the screen. Also, I remember magazines at the time were disappointed the top-down levels were taken out of the GBA version, which made it all the more surprising for me to eventually discover everyone else aside from me and the guys who wrote those magazines hated them so much. I played all the way through Xenoblade 1's main story, and while I must have liked it to an extent to stick with an 80+ hour game to the end, I can't say it ever really clicked with me as well as I felt it should have. The Achilles heel was the combat system, usually the most important aspect of any RPG themed game for me. It never made much sense to me. I didn't feel like I understood how it worked, nor did I really need to. I'd either win or lose, regardless of the thought or care I put into my battle options. Levels were also much too prominent. From my experience, if you were even one level lower than the enemy, you wouldn't stand a chance, but one level higher and you were practically invincible against them. I could see what they were going for, and if it gelled with me, then I probably would have absolutely loved the game. But for me to truly enjoy an RPG, I need to understand its battle system well enough to know how everything clicks together. Like, when it comes to Pokemon, I'm like Professor Frink with that toy. You will simply not enjoy it on as many levels as I do. There have been many quirky characters in the Ace Attorney series. Some have been more annoying than funny or endearing to me because they try way too hard to be quirky, funny and/or endearing. But never has one been put into such an important role as Herlock Sholmes, and never have I disliked an Ace Attorney character more. I absolutely could not stand the guy. Every time he appeared on screen, the essence of my soul would slowly die under the weight of his boring, meandering dialogue, and I wanted nothing more than to fast forward for it all. But that's not a good idea when you're playing Ace Attorney and every piece of info could be vital, even when it's spewed out of his wretched mouth. He's the type of character I get the sense I'm supposed to love simply because he's written to be as meme-worthy as possible, which actually only makes me resent him more. The dances of deduction were painful to get through. An immense feeling of dread would wash over me whenever I knew one was coming up. Ace Attorney is at its best when breaking apart testimonies that appeared solid on first glance. Solving ridiculously easy mysteries that anyone other than Herlock Sholmes could see the problem with in 2 seconds isn't my idea of a good time. Oh, but actually, you don't see he's actually a genius because he was doing this because he was cheating. I don't care. Just get him away from me. And you know what? I hated Iris as well. Look, after watching The Simpsons all these years and putting up with Lisa for as long as I have, I think I've earned the right to be weary of precocious child genius characters that are smarter than all the adults around them. Susato is certainly no Maya either. Plus, any haha woman beat up man funny moments when you know the reverse would never happen is pretty much the fastest way to get me to hate a female character. Naruto Hondo was the only one of the main 4 I actually liked, and even he's basically an inferior version of Phoenix in my opinion. But having said all this, I still like the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles a lot, however odd it may be to have 3 of the main characters as my least favourites by a long distance. I hate this song from Deadly Premonition. Gets me irrationally angry every time. I like the lower weapon hit rates than usual in Fire Emblem Binding Blade. As much as I love watching weapons bounce off characters like Hector or Oswin with that also satisfying no damage dink, realistically, no one should be able to shrug off attacks that easily, no matter how good their armour is. The more inaccurate weapons and lower defense of most playable characters in Binding Blade makes the combat feel more dangerous and lifelike, while simultaneously making the avoid boosts from terrain and supports all the sweeter to take advantage of. Making sure Lilina is speed blessed enough to avoid everything thrown at her and then frying the opposition with her absurdly strong magic is one of my most beloved joys to come from this series. And what more needs to be said of Cleric?